find out about the Aldric Commission the same way I find out about most things that are going to change my life. Standing in a hallway I wasn't supposed to be in, holding a coffee I haven't touched yet, overhearing a conversation through a door that's open just enough. Graham Voss. His voice carries in a way that suggests he's always known it does and has decided he likes that about himself. Both of them, he's saying. Let them run parallel proposals. Best design wins the lead. The other one goes to Berlin. A pause. Then, Sebastian will understand. I don't wait to hear whether Sebastian understands. I walk back to my desk the long way, through the east corridor, past the model room where 3 months of my work sits behind glass and careful scale. The curved beam structure, the light well calculations, everything I've built toward the Aldric Commission since the brief landed on my desk. I stop and look at it for a moment. This small, perfect version of a thing I want, and I think, 12 days. That's what I'll find out later. The gala is in 12 days. Graham Voss will stand up in front of everyone who matters in this industry and say one name, and the other name will get on a plane to Berlin. I don't know this yet. Right now, I just know that I'm in competition with Sebastian Voss, which is not new information. We have been in competition since the day I interviewed here, and he sat in on the panel because apparently that's something people do at family firms. But now the competition has a deadline, a stage, and a consequence that I can't unfeel. My desk is across the open plan floor from his. We've worked this way for 3 years. He sits by the window. I sit near the east wall, closer to the model room. We do not share resources gracefully. We do not eat lunch at the same time. There is an unspoken geometry to how we occupy the office, and everyone else seems to understand it the way they understand weather. It's simply a condition of the place. When I get back to my desk, Sebastian is already there. Not at my desk, obviously, but present in the room, jacket on, standing at the window with a phone to his ear, speaking quietly. He doesn't look at me. He never looks at me unless he has to. I open my project files. I pull up the Aldric model. I read the same paragraph of the brief 4 times and absorb none of it. 12 days. Something cold has settled at the base of my spine. Not fear, exactly. The thing before fear. The place where you're still deciding whether to be afraid or whether to be the kind of person who isn't. I haven't decided yet. Here is what you need to understand about Sebastian Voss and me. It started professionally, clean, traceable, almost reasonable. I joined Caldwell and Voss 3 years ago on the strength of a portfolio that Graham Voss himself described as unexpectedly sophisticated, which I decided to take as a compliment, despite the unexpectedly. Sebastian had been at the firm for a year by then. He had the kind of settled comfort in the space that comes from knowing a building since before it had furniture, which in his case was literally true since his father had founded it. The first time we disagreed, it was about a load-bearing decision on the Ferris Cultural Center project. I was right. He was not wrong exactly, and his approach was safer. Mine was more elegant. But the design team went with mine, and Sebastian absorbed that with the same expression he gives to most things. A kind of measured stillness, like he's waiting for you to finish being whatever you're currently being. It should have been fine after that. It wasn't, because I kept being right in ways that cost him something, and he kept being better in ways that cost me something, and at some point the professional friction developed this other quality, harder to name, uncomfortable to sit with, where I would notice him across the room and feel something that was not quite rivalry and not quite anything else I had a good word for. I notice, for instance, the way he holds a pencil when he's thinking, turning it end over end with 2 fingers, slow and automatic, like a tell he doesn't know he has. I notice that he's the only person in the office who says thank you to the building's cleaning staff by name. I notice that he laughs occasionally at things that aren't that funny, and the laugh is not what you'd expect from his face. It's quick and a little unguarded, and it's over before you can get a proper look at it. I notice these things the way you notice a crack in a wall you've been walking past for years. It doesn't mean anything. It's just there, present. Nadia is the one who named it approximately 8 months ago, which I'll get to. Right now it's day 1 of 12 days, and Sebastian has ended his phone call and is opening his laptop, and his face is the usual careful nothing. and I have no idea yet what he knows or when he found out. I find out at 4 p.m. when he appears at the edge of my desk without warning and says, "I assume you know about the commission." Not a question. "Yes," I say. He looks at my screen, the Aldric schematics, the timeline I've already started reorganizing, and then he looks at me. This is unusual. He rarely looks directly at me for more than a second, and when he does, I always have the disorienting sense that he's seeing something I didn't offer. "Then we understand each other," he says. "We always have," I say. "That's never been the problem." Something moves behind his eyes. Then he nods once and walks back to his desk. Nadia appears at my shoulder 45 seconds later. "That looked tense," she says. "It was fine." "Eli, your jaw." I unclench my jaw. "It was fine," I say again. She makes a sound that communicates profound skepticism through purely nasal means and goes back to her drafting table. I look across the room. Sebastian is bent over his keyboard, typing fast, the evening light going flat and gray behind him. He has not looked back at me. 12 days. It happens on day 3. This is important. I need you to understand the specific conditions that produce it, because I've run the sequence back in my mind so many times since then that I've nearly worn it smooth, and I still can't find the moment I would change. We are the last 2 people in the office. This is not unusual. We are both the kind of person who stays late when something matters. But tonight it has a particular quality, like the whole floor is holding its breath. Everyone else has gone. The lights on the south side have gone to standby. It's just us and the models and the hum of the ventilation system. I am trying to work through a structural problem with the Aldric East Wing, and it is not working. And I have been trying to work through it for 2 hours, and at some point I stopped being frustrated with the problem and started being frustrated with the situation. The 12 days Berlin, the fact that Graham Voss is making his son compete for his own inheritance and calling it fair. And when I get frustrated in that particular way, I talk. Not loudly, but continuously. I've been murmuring under my breath for about 15 minutes when Sebastian says from across the room without looking up, "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "The murmuring." I'm thinking out loud. "You're murmuring about my father's management decision," he says, still not looking up, "which is not productive for either of us." I'm not. I stop. I am, a little. It's a legitimate critique. You're his son. You should be the lead automatically. The fact that he's making you compete for it against me is, "Don't," he says, very flat, very quiet. "Don't what?" I'm trying to say I think it's unfair to... He's up. He crosses the room faster than I expect. Sebastian moves with a kind of deliberate economy. He doesn't rush, and this is rushing. And then he is at my desk, and he is very close. And he looks at me for 1 full second with an expression I have never seen on his face before, something that is not quite anger and not quite its opposite, and then he puts one hand against my jaw and kisses me. It lasts approximately 4 seconds. His hand is warm. He smells like cedar and something fainter underneath it that I will spend the next several days trying and failing to identify. The kiss is not tentative. It is precise, deliberate, and very quiet, the way he does most things. Then he pulls back, takes 1 step away, and the expression on his face, the unguarded, almost undone expression that was there for 1 full second when he was this close, is gone, replaced almost instantaneously by the usual careful nothing. "Go home, Eli," he says. He picks up his bag. He walks to the elevator. The doors close. I sit very still at my desk for a long time looking at the East Wing schematics that I still haven't solved, and I think he is going to pretend that did not happen. I already know this. I can feel the shape of it, the way he'll look through me tomorrow morning, the way this will be stored in whatever sealed room he keeps things he's decided not to have. He is going to pretend it didn't happen. I am not going to let him. He is already at his desk when I arrive. He has coffee. He is reading something on his screen. He does not look up when I walk in. I put my bag down. I take off my coat. I stand at the edge of his workstation and say, "Good morning." "Morning," he says, still reading. "We should talk about last night." "I don't know what you mean." He says this completely calmly, the way someone says the sky is gray, or not even a flicker, not a single tell, not the pencil turning. He just keeps reading. I have a choice here. I can push, which is what I want to do, or I can let him have this moment of denial and wait, which is what every instinct I've developed over 3 years of knowing him tells me is the better play. Because here's what I've learned about Sebastian Voss. He does not respond to being cornered. He responds to patience. He responds to time. He responds to being given enough rope that he eventually ties himself a knot with it. "All right," I say. I go to my desk. Nadia arrives at 8:30, drops her bag, takes one look at me and says, "What happened?" "Nothing," I say. She turns to look at Sebastian, then back at me. Her expression is the face of a person who has correctly diagnosed a medical condition and is choosing not to say so because it would take too long. "Okay," she says, and leaves it there, which I appreciate more than I can currently articulate. The day passes. Sebastian and I work. We have a project check-in at 2 o'clock where we sit across a table with Graham Voss's assistant and present our respective timelines for the Aldric proposals. Sebastian's timeline is aggressive. Mine is equally aggressive. Graham's assistant makes notes and smiles blandly and leaves. Sebastian and I do not look at each other during this meeting, which is not unusual except that today the not looking has a different texture. Careful rather than habitual, deliberate rather than automatic. He knows what he's doing. He always knows what he's doing. That night I call Daniel, my older brother, because Daniel calls me every week whether I want him to or not, and it's easier to answer than to explain the missed call later. "How's work?" he says, complicated. "The job thing Mum told me about? The commission?" "Yes. And complicated." Daniel has known me for 26 years. He lets this sit for a moment and then says, "Is there a person involved?" I don't say anything. "Eli." "Good night, Daniel." I hang up. I look at my ceiling. The East Wing problem is still unsolved. I pick up my sketch pad and work on it for an hour, and somewhere around midnight, almost without noticing, I find the solution. A cantilevered secondary support that resolves the tension I've been fighting for 3 days. And I write it down with the sudden clarity you only get when part of your brain has been quietly working while the rest of it was occupied with something else entirely. I think about Cedar, about the specific warmth of a hand. I put the sketch pad down. 9 days. Nadia tells me what she knows at lunch on day 5, which I will mark for the rest of my life, as the conversation where someone else said the thing I had been carefully not saying to myself for 8 months. We're at the sandwich place 2 blocks from the office. It's raining, a thin, persistent November rain that makes the city look like someone turned the saturation down. Nadia has the kind of focused calm that means she's been thinking about this for a while and has decided to say it. "Can I tell you something?" she says, which in Nadia's vocabulary means, "I am going to tell you something." "Nadia?" "He looks at you," she says, like actually looks at you, the way he won't look at anything else in the room. "He looks through me." "No, he looks at you, and then he makes himself stop, which is different. I've been watching it for 8 months, and I've been quiet about it because I thought you'd figure it out yourself, but you're going to Berlin if you don't sort this out, and I can't watch you get on a plane when you don't have to." I eat half my sandwich. Outside, the rain comes down, steady and indifferent. "He kissed me," I say, "on day 3, then told me he didn't know what I was talking about." Nadia is very still for a moment. Then, "He kissed you." "Yes," and then denied it. Immediately and completely. She puts down her own sandwich. She looks at the rain. Then she looks at me. "He's terrified," she says. "Sebastian Voss is not terrified of anything." "He's terrified of this," she says, with the quiet certainty of someone who has been paying attention to something longer than you have. "He's been terrified of this since you got here. He built the whole rivalry thing as a container, somewhere to put it, and now the container has a deadline, and he panicked, and She stops. "And he kissed you to shut you up." "That's what I think too," I say. "So what are you going to do?" I look at the rain. I think about 9 days, and Berlin, and the East Wing solution I found at midnight, and the way his expression went from completely open to completely closed in the space of 2 seconds. I'm going to make it very difficult for him to keep pretending, I say. Nadia picks up her sandwich again. Good, she says. Making it difficult turns out to be simpler than I expected. Not easier. Simpler. There's a difference. I stop keeping the distance. I stop navigating around him in the model room. I stop not looking at him in meetings. I don't push. I don't crowd. I don't say anything I'll regret. I just stop performing the geography of avoidance that we've both been performing for 3 years, and I let us exist in the same space like two people who occupy the same room without needing it to mean war. It costs him something. I can see that. The pencil turning gets faster. He arrives at the office earlier, as if catching me before I arrive will give him some kind of structural advantage. But I start arriving earlier too, and on day 6 we are both in the building at 6:45 a.m., and he looks at me across the empty office with something flickering behind his eyes that he immediately smooths away. You're here early, I say. So are you. The Aldric East Wing. I solved the cantilever problem. A pause. He crosses to the model room. Not toward me, toward the model, which is close to the same thing right now. He looks at the East Wing. He doesn't say anything for a long moment. That's good work, he says finally. The words land harder than they should, because Sebastian Voss does not give compliments lightly, and I know this, and he knows I know this, and we both stand there in the cold, gray, early morning with that fact between us. Thank you, I say. He looks at me, just for a moment, then back at the model. The Berlin thing, he says very carefully. It shouldn't be. He stops. What? Nothing. He turns. I'll look at the East Wing numbers later. And then Nadia arrives, shaking rain off her coat, and the moment is over and he retreats to his desk and I look at mine, but something has shifted. Some small gear has turned that wasn't turning before. 6 days. Graham Voss does not appear in the office often. He tends to work from the upper floor in a corner suite with a view of the river that I've been inside twice. But on day 7, he comes down to the main floor, which I've learned means something is being decided, and he takes Sebastian into the model room and closes the door. I can't hear the conversation. Nobody can. But I can see Sebastian's face through the glass partition, and I can see the moment it changes. Somewhere around the 4-minute mark, the careful nothing gives way to something that is very clearly not agreement. They're in there for 20 minutes. When Sebastian comes out, Graham is smiling in the particular way that means he thinks the conversation went his way. He stops by my desk on his way to the elevator. Eli, he says, strong work on the East Wing revision. Keep going. He pats the back of my chair. An oddly paternal gesture, warm and slightly condescending, and leaves. I watch Sebastian across the room. He is standing at his own desk, not sitting, both hands flat on the surface, looking at something that isn't there. After a moment, he straightens, rolls his sleeves up to the elbow, and starts working. I go to Nadia. What was that? I don't know, she says. But Sebastian's back to rolling up his sleeves, which he only does when he's rebuilding from scratch. Graham changed the brief on him. That's what it looks like. I look at Sebastian across the room. He is working fast now, purposeful. The focused intensity of someone solving a problem they weren't expecting to have. I feel something I did not anticipate. It is not satisfaction at a setback. It is something closer to protectiveness, which is inconvenient and uncomfortable and absolutely true. At lunch, I go to the model room and stand at the East Wing for a while thinking. Sebastian appears in the doorway. He moved the Aldric timeline up. He says, 2 days. Proposal presentations are now in 4 days, not 6. I turn around. Why? Because he can. Sebastian says this without bitterness, which is more unsettling than bitterness would be. He does this. Adjusts conditions at the last moment. He calls it testing resilience. That's a charitable name for it. Something passes over his face. Yes, he says quietly, it is. We stand on opposite sides of the model. Between us, the small, careful buildings rise in their glass case, precise and silent. 4 days, I say. 4 days, Jamar, he agrees. He turns to go. I say, without planning to, Sebastian. He stops. The thing you said in the office 3 nights ago, that you didn't know what I meant. His shoulders are very still. I just want you to know, I say, that I'm not going to stop knowing what happened. You can decide not to talk about it, but I'm going to keep knowing. A long silence. The model room hums quietly around us. Eli, he says. His voice has a different quality. Lower, more careful. Don't do this right now. I'm not doing anything, I say. I'm just telling you where I am. He walks out. I stand with the models for another minute and I think, he didn't say don't do this. He said don't do this right now, which means there is a right time, which means he is holding a door open even while he stands in front of it. 4 days. On day 9, the night before the proposal presentations, something softens. I don't know how to explain it. Nothing dramatic happens. We are both in the office late again, the rest of the building asleep and quiet. And at some point I make coffee because I'm the one who finds the last packet in the kitchen. And I bring a cup to his desk without saying anything, and he takes it without saying anything. And we work for another hour in this strange, companionable silence that feels nothing like the 3 years of careful distance that preceded it. Around 11, he leans back in his chair and says, "Can I see the cantilever solution?" I bring my sketch pad over. He studies it. I stand next to him. Closer than I would have been 2 weeks ago. And he turns the pages and doesn't tell me to move back. "This is elegant," he says. "I know." He looks up. The corner of his mouth moves, not quite a smile, but the place where a smile lives when it's thinking about showing up. "You're insufferable," he says. "You've mentioned. Multiple times. And yet somehow never enough times to actually stop me. And then, here, in this moment that feels almost like peace, almost like something arrived at him, he laughs. The real laugh. The quick, unguarded one. The one that's over before you can properly look at it. Except this time I'm close enough that I catch a piece of it before it disappears, and it lands somewhere in the center of my chest and stays there. We work for another 2 hours. He doesn't touch me, doesn't say anything that opens the door he's been standing in front of. But when I finally put my coat on at 1 in the morning, he says, "Eli," and I turn and he says, "Good luck tomorrow." "You too," I say. I mean it. I am in the elevator thinking, this is too easy. We have not resolved anything. Something is about to break. I am right. The presentations are at 10. We each present to Graham and the senior partners separately. I go first, Sebastian goes second, and by noon it is over and we are both back on the main floor waiting. At 2:15, Graham Voss calls Sebastian upstairs. I watch him go. Nadia appears beside me. "It could go either way," she says quietly. "Your proposal was exceptional. So was his." "I know. Nadia, if I go to Berlin..." "You're not going to Berlin. But if I..." "Eli." She puts her hand on my arm, brief and certain. "Stop." Sebastian comes back down at 2:45. His face is the careful nothing. He sits at his desk. He doesn't look at me. At 3 o'clock, Graham's assistant sends a calendar invite to the whole firm. Gala announcement. Aldric Commission lead, Friday 7 p.m., 2 days away. Nothing resolved, nothing announced. Just the date on a calendar, sitting there like a stone. I look at Sebastian. He is looking at his screen. And then at 3:15, I get an email from Graham Voss. Not the firm listserv, to me directly. "Eli, I wanted you to hear this from me before Friday. I've made my decision. I'll be announcing at the gala. You've done excellent work. I hope you'll stay with the firm regardless of where we land." GV, I read it twice. I read it 3 times. And then I understand. This is not an offer of anything. This is a consolation. "I hope you'll stay with the firm regardless of where we land" means Graham Voss has already decided. And what he's decided is that Sebastian Voss, his son, the person he built this company to hand to, the person it was always going to be, will take the Aldric lead. I'm going to Berlin. The thing I feel is not anger, exactly. It's something more structural, like a wall you've been leaning against finally revealing that it was load-bearing, and without it, the whole room shifts. I put my phone face down on my desk. I pick up my bag. I take the east corridor past the model room, past the small glass version of my East Wing solution sitting there in its case, and I go outside into the afternoon and walk until the office building is out of sight. Daniel calls at 6. I answer this time. Mom said you haven't called in 2 weeks? He says, well, what's happening? I'm losing a promotion, I say, to Berlin. A pause. Is it the person? I lean against the wall of the coffee shop I've ended up in. Outside, the city is doing what cities do in November, going dark early, condensation on every glass surface, people moving quickly with their collars up. His father made the decision before the presentations, I say. It was always going to be Sebastian. I think I knew that. I think I just didn't want to factor it in. The person is Sebastian Voss, Daniel says, not a question. Daniel, I'm not judging, he says immediately. I'm asking. A long silence. The coffee shop has a song playing, something slow and not quite sad, the kind of music that exists to be background but keeps almost being meaning. Yes, I say, and does he know? He kissed me, and then told me he had no idea what I was talking about. Another pause. Then Daniel slowly, that is either the most cowardly thing I've ever heard or the most scared. I keep going back and forth on which one. Eli, those are the same thing. I think about this for a long time after we hang up. Those are the same thing. Cowardly and scared. The same root. Different names. Sebastian Voss, who is composed under every kind of professional pressure, who manages his father's impossible standards with the careful precision of someone who's been doing it since he was a child, who built a rivalry with me out of a feeling he didn't have a container for. He is terrified of this. Nadia said so. Daniel is saying so. And somewhere underneath everything, I think I've known it. I finish my coffee. I go back to the office. Sebastian is still there. He looks up when I come in, takes one look at my face and says, "You got the email?" "Yes." "Eli? Did you know?" I say. "When we were in the model room last night, did you already know he'd decided?" A pause. A long one. "Yes," he says quietly. "He told me this afternoon." "And you didn't say anything." What would I have said? I put my bag down. I look at him across the room. Really look, the full, direct look I've been calibrating for 10 days, the one I stopped holding back. You could have said you were sorry. You could have said it wasn't the decision you wanted. You could have said, "I stop." You could have said something true. He's very still. The pencil isn't moving. "I don't know how to do this," he says very quietly, something I've never heard from him before, and not the professional precision, not the careful nothing. Something stripped of both. "Do what?" I say. He looks at me. The expression from the night of the kiss, that unguarded, almost undone thing, is back. And this time, it doesn't disappear. "This," he says simply. "I don't know how to do this." I look at him. The office is completely empty and very quiet around us. And outside the window, the city has gone that specific dark blue that happens just before the sky goes black. "I know," I say. "I'm going to help you." The next morning, 36 hours before the gala, Nadia does something I don't ask her to do and will never fully be able to thank her for. She goes upstairs and asks for a meeting with Graham Voss. I don't know she's done it until she comes back down 40 minutes later, sits at her desk, and very calmly resumes drafting. I give it 10 minutes and then go over. "What did you do?" I say. "I told him the East Wing solution was yours from foundation to finish," she says, not looking up. "I told him Sebastian's timeline modifications were derived from your structural innovation, which is true. And I told him that if he sent you to Berlin, he would be losing the single strongest architectural voice at this firm. And also that his son is in love with you, which is not professionally relevant, but which I decided to include anyway." I stare at her. "Before you panic," she says, still not looking up, I want you to know that I have been watching both of you for 8 months, and I stand entirely behind every word I said. Nadia? He listened, she says. He didn't say much, but he listened. She looks up now, and her face is the face of someone who has done something they believe in and is not asking for permission. I'm not promising it changes anything. I just couldn't let you go without someone saying it out loud. I look at her for a long time. Thank you, I say. Don't thank me, she says. Just don't get on the plane. The gala is held at the Pemberton, a renovated warehouse space the firm uses for client events. It looks good in the way that expensive things are designed to look. Warm light on exposed brick, the city visible through floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind of room that makes everyone in it feel more significant than they did outside. I come in from the rain, coat damp, and find a drink. Sebastian is across the room with his father, looking impeccable in a way that makes my chest do something inconvenient. He sees me. He doesn't look away this time. For the first hour, we orbit. I talk to partners and clients. He talks to partners and clients. The room moves around us in the careful choreography of professional events, handshakes and glasses, and the kind of conversation that is mostly about something else. Graham takes the center of the room at 8:30. He taps his glass. The room goes quiet. 11 years ago, he says, Marcus Aldric first approached this firm with a vision that we've been building toward ever since. Tonight, the Aldric Commission becomes the next chapter of that vision, and I'm proud to announce its lead architect. He pauses. He looks at Sebastian, then at me. Then he says, Eli Marsh. The room applauds. I look at Graham Voss. He meets my eye and gives one small nod. Not warm, not cold, just, there it is. And I understand that Nadia moved something that was already slightly movable, and that Graham Voss, for all his difficult edges, is a man who can update a decision when the information changes. I look for Sebastian. He is standing at the far edge of the room, very still, and his expression, I can see it from here, I've learned to read it across distances, is not devastation. It is something more complicated. Relief, maybe. The specific shape of someone setting down something heavy, and then he lifts his glass toward me, just barely, across the room. I think, we still have to talk. We are not finished. This is not the resolution. This is the conditions becoming possible. The conversation I need to have is still out there, waiting. He's gone when I look back. Not the building, just the room. I find his coat on the rack in the entrance hall and know he hasn't left entirely, which means he's on the fire stairs or the roof or somewhere that isn't the careful, orchestrated warmth of the Pemberton's main floor. I go to the roof. He's there. Standing at the edge of the terrace, glass in hand, looking at the city. The rain has stopped, leaving everything that wet, specific smell of city after rain. Something mineral, something cold, the faintest trace of something growing underneath the concrete. I stand beside him. Neither of us says anything for a moment. Berlin, I say finally. Berlin, he says. Not bitterly, just acknowledging. You'll be good there. I know. A pause. That's not the part I'm thinking about. I look at him. He is looking at the city, and I have learned enough now to know that when he won't look at me, it's not because there's nothing to see. It's because there's too much, and he doesn't know yet what to do with it. You denied it, I say, for 10 days very thoroughly. I know. Sebastian, that's not nothing. I need you to know I understand why, and it doesn't fix it entirely. He turns to look at me then. The city is spread behind him, and the sky is that exact dark blue, the last of it before full black, and his face is more open than I have ever seen it in 3 years and 10 days of knowing him. I know it doesn't fix it, he says. I'm not asking you to. I'm not asking for anything. He stops, starts again. I spent 3 years making a container for this, making it into something manageable, competition, rivalry, and something with rules and edges. And then you solved the East Wing at midnight, and I could hear it in your voice. the way you talked about it, and I couldn't. He stops again. Couldn't what? Couldn't keep it in the container, he says quietly. I look at him for a long time. The city hums below us, distant and alive. So you kissed me, I say, to shut me up, because I was about to say something true and you weren't ready. Yes, very direct, very honest. I'm sorry. I know you are. Eli, I know, I say. I know you are. I needed to say it. I needed you to hear it once. A silence. The dark blue deepens. Somewhere below us a taxi goes past, its light briefly gold against the wet street. What happens now, he says. Now, I say, you go to Berlin and I run the Aldric Commission, and we figure out the rest of it like adults, which I believe we're both technically capable of being. Something in him releases. I can see it. A breath he's been holding for 10 days, maybe longer. I never told you, he says carefully, that the reason I sat in on your interview panel was because I'd read your portfolio and wanted to see if you were real. I stare at him. What? Your thesis project, the light well system. I'd never seen that approach before. I wanted to see if the person matched the work. The corner of his mouth moves. You argued with my father in the first 5 minutes? He was wrong about the load distribution. Yes, Sebastian says. He was. And now the smile is there, fully, the quick, unguarded one. And this time I get to look at it for as long as I want. Sebastian, I say, this is a terrible time to tell me that. I know, he says, I'm 3 years late. At least. He looks at me. I look at him. The city is very bright below us and very far away. Come back, I say. From Berlin, come back. Yes, he says. Simply, completely, with no equivocation. Yes. The gala winds down and we go back inside separately, and for the rest of the evening we are both professional and present and unremarkable, and nobody who wasn't watching very carefully would know that anything had changed on a rooftop at the edge of November. Nadia finds me near midnight, by the coats. Well, she says. He's going to Berlin, I say. And he's coming back. She studies my face. Okay, she says. Okay, good. She gets her coat. For what it's worth, she says, pausing, I think he's been building toward you since the interview, in his particular catastrophically bad at expressing it way. I'm starting to understand that. Good. She kisses my cheek. Don't let him do the container thing again. I won't, I say. She leaves. I stand by the coat rack for a moment. Sebastian appears from the direction of the bar, carrying his coat, and we are briefly alone in the entrance hall with the sounds of the party behind us and the street visible through the glass ahead. I'll call, he says. You'll call? From Berlin, I'll call. Sebastian, you have a track record of denying things that have happened. He looks at me. Not this, he says. I won't deny this. I look at him for a long moment, reading his face the way I've learned to read it, looking for the careful nothing. It isn't there. What's there instead is something quieter and more certain, something that has been present all along under the architecture he built around it. Okay, I say. He puts his coat on. He's almost to the door when I say, Sebastian, in the model room. The night I came back from the cafe, you said you didn't know how to do this. He turns. You're doing it, I say. You've been doing it for 10 days. You're doing it right now. Something crosses his face that I don't have a name for yet, but will have time to learn. He nods once. He goes out into the night. I watch him through the glass, the wet street, the taxi, the brief gold of the window as the door swings shut. I put my own coat on. I stand at the threshold. I think, there's still one thing that hasn't been said. We have said almost everything else. The rest of it lives in Berlin and phone calls and the months ahead, and I'm not afraid of that. I go outside. The city is cold and bright and still smells of rain. The morning Sebastian leaves for Berlin, I am the first one in the office. earlier than him for the first time in 12 days because his flight is at noon and he has things to do that don't involve me. I go to the model room. I turn the light on, just the low blue white of the display lighting, and I stand at the east wing and look at the cantilever solution, the elegant small resolution of a problem I worked on in the dark. I think about the 3 years of geometry we built between us, the careful navigation, the model room as neutral territory, the floor plan as a kind of language. I think about the interval of 10 days that took what was latent and made it legible. I think about a hand against my jaw, the cedar, the warmth. Outside, the city is doing its gray November morning thing, flat light, traffic starting up, the sounds of ordinary days. In here, the models are silent and perfect in their cases. The east wing stands the way I designed it to stand, bearing its weight without drama, which is, when I think about it, the only architecture worth building. I'm still here when Nadia arrives. She comes to the model room doorway, reads my face, and says nothing. Just brings me a coffee and stands next to me for a moment looking at the models. "He called me," she says eventually. "When?" "This morning early." A pause. "He wanted to know if you were okay." Something moves in my chest. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were fine and that he should tell you that himself." "Did he say he would?" "He said—" She stops, smiles slightly. "He said he knew." The model room light hums. Outside, a door opens somewhere in the office, and other people start arriving, the day beginning its ordinary momentum. I look at the east wing one more time, the cantilever. The solution I found at midnight when I wasn't looking for it. "Okay," I say, "let's go to work." He calls that night, from Berlin. It is 11 p.m., and I'm in my kitchen, not at my desk, not in the office, standing at the counter with a glass of water and the Aldric files spread out on the table, and my phone screen lights up with his name. "You made it," I say. "I made it." His voice has a different quality over the phone, a little stripped of everything non-essential, more directly him. "How's Berlin?" "Gray. Colder than here." A pause. "The apartment has a view of a canal." "That's something." "Yes?" Another pause. Then, "I'm calling because Nadia told me to, and also because I wanted to." "I know," I say, "both of those things can be true." He is quiet for a moment. I can hear the specific silence of a room that isn't the office, something more ordinary, a tap, a distant sound of traffic with a different accent to it. "Eli," he says, "I want to say the thing I didn't say on the roof." I am very still at my kitchen counter. The Aldrich files are spread around me, 3 months of work. And the city outside my window is the same city he left today and I stay in, and between us, there is a distance I have decided to not be afraid of. "Okay," I say. "I told you I didn't know how to do this," he says. "And you said I was already doing it. I've been thinking about that since the taxi to the airport." A pause. "What I didn't say is why it's hard, why it was always hard." "Tell me." "Because you're the only person I've met who I can't perform at," he says, quietly, completely. "Everyone else, I know what they need from me. I know how to be what the situation requires. With you, I couldn't find the right shape. You kept seeing through the version of me I put forward, and I didn't build a contingency for that. I think about the 3 years, the rivalry as container, the pencil turning, the laugh he never let land. I kept seeing you," I say. "That's all. I kept just seeing you." A silence. Long enough that I counted. "I know," he says. "I think that's why I kissed you. To shut me up. To stop having to pretend I hadn't noticed." His voice is quieter now, lower. "You were about to say something kind about the unfairness of the competition, and I was going to have to stand there and hear it and pretend it didn't matter, and I couldn't." A pause. "I couldn't pretend anymore, and I didn't have any better way to stop." "You could have," I say, "just said that." "I know that now." "Sebastian, I know." And then with a precision that is entirely him, "I'm in love with you. I have been for some time. I'm telling you now because I'm in Berlin and you're in London, and there is no version of this in which pretending helps either of us. My kitchen is very quiet. The Aldric files sit on my table, patient and still. Outside, London is doing what London does. I know, I say. My voice is steady, which surprises me. I think I've known for a while. I just needed to hear you say it first. A short exhale. Not quite a laugh. The thing before a laugh. Eli, that's incredibly unfair. I know, I'm sorry. No, you're not. No, I agree. Not even slightly. And now he does laugh, in the real one, the quick, unguarded one. And it carries clearly across the distance, across the gray Atlantic cold into my kitchen at 11 p.m., and it lands in the center of my chest the same way it did in the office, the same place with the same permanent weight. Come back soon, I say, as soon as I can, he says, I promise. I look at the Aldric files on my table, the East Wing, the cantilever solution I found at midnight when I was trying to think about something else, the solution that came because I'd stopped fighting it and let my brain do the thing it needed to do. Sebastian, I say, when you get back, I want to show you the full cantilever model in person, in the model room. A pause. That's a very professional way to say something that isn't professional at all. I know. I smile into the phone. I'm multi-talented. Yes, he says, and his voice has that quality. Stripped of everything, just him. Just the warm, direct, certain thing underneath all the architecture he spent 3 years building around it. You are. We stay on the phone for another hour. Not about Berlin or the commission or anything that matters in a professional sense. Just the ordinary conversation of two people who have stopped pretending the other one isn't the most interesting thing in the room. Outside, London goes quiet and dark. Inside, the Aldric files wait for morning. I look at the East Wing solution on my table, the lines of it, the elegant resolution, the way it holds weight without making a performance of holding it. I think, yes, that is exactly right.